Dr. Carmen Imes, one of the most controversial, difficult passages in the Bible is in Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, because it seems to imply that men should rule over or dominate women. Now, you're an Old Testament scholar, so I want your take on this, but let me read it, and then we'll discuss it.
Yep.
It says, to the woman he said, and this is a part of the consequences of the curse, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Now, I especially want your take as a woman for this. I think it will be really interesting. Before we get into your perspective on it, maybe tell us a little bit about, are there different ways people take this passage?
Yes, there are definitely different ways people take this passage. And I would say the two main views, so one view, to answer the question, are men supposed to rule over women? One answer to that question would be yes.
Okay.
And I think that camp would say, they would back up to chapter 2 and say God created Adam first and then Eve, and that being created first is what gives Adam the priority over Eve and shows that he's in charge. And so built into the very creative act of God, Adam's supposed to be in charge. And sometimes scholars will cite primogeniture as the reason for that, which is interesting. We can go into how that fits and doesn't fit. And then the other view would be to say, no, men are not supposed to rule over women because, as you mentioned, this is coming as a consequence of the fall. It's not part of God's creation design. And it could be argued that this is the first place where we have asymmetry or hierarchy between men and women in the Bible. So this is a consequence of the fall, not what God intended. So those are the two.
That makes total sense. Now, this has implications for the egalitarian complementarian debate. We won't get into that. That will take a much longer video. But is there anything else about the kind of the context of the passage here that would help us make sense of it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to notice that the word where it talks about your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you, different translations, I'm reading from the NIV, different translations render that differently. Is this desire a good thing? Is it like you just want him to lead you, but he's going to dominate you? Or is it you're trying to overcome him and he's going to overcome you back? Like what is the dynamic here? And I tend to read it as a negative thing because the same word desire appears in the next chapter. As sin is crouching at the door, it desires to have you. So I tend to see that desire as a negative thing, that the woman is trying to dominate the man and the man is trying to dominate her back. That this kind of angst that comes into the picture is a result of sin and a result of the fall. So, as you said, a consequence.
Okay, so your take on this is two reasons why this is kind of a negative thing. Is where desire, go to the next chapter, refers to sinful desire. And the context is this is what happens as a result of the fall, not built in as God's design. Those are the two main factors that shape your interpretation. Okay.
Yeah. And if we back up to chapter 1, where God says that he's created humankind as his image, and we've done another talk about that.
We have,
about my book being God's image. There it says that both male and female are the image of God, and both of them are told to rule, but the list of what they're supposed to rule over is only the created beasts. Like it's the fish and the birds and the creatures, the livestock, the wild animals, and the creatures that move along the ground. So humans are supposed to together collaborate to rule on God's behalf. This is the first place where we get a human ruling over another human.
Oh, so that's interesting. And this, we could go a whole nother direction here, but the idea of Eve coming from Adam's side as opposed to his foot, you would refer to other things, that this is a partnership, a co-rule that they are doing together. Now, if we get to the New Testament, there's a whole separate conversation. What would that mean for being a pastor and for marriage? Separate issue. We're just talking about here within Genesis itself. So tell us your preferred interpretation and why you take that interpretation.
Yeah, I don't find it persuasive that there's hierarchy in chapter 2 between the man and the woman, that there's like already baked into the beginning a sort of male leadership bent, but that I see that as a result of the fall. And I mentioned primogeniture. This is usually talked about in contexts where there's there's 2 sons born, and it's the older son who gets the inheritance, the larger share of the inheritance. And so to apply that to a husband-wife situation seems a little strange because normally it's about siblings inheriting, not about husband and wife.
Interesting.
Also, to argue that Adam is in charge because he was made first feels a little funny in Genesis 2 because we've already had Genesis 1 in which humans were made last. So if we were gonna say first means you're in charge, then we've got fish and birds ruling over all of the other creation, including us.
That's fair. I hadn't thought of it that way.
I don't know. I think it's certainly not a hard and fast rule. So the case would have to be made from the language being used that there's something about Adam being created first that means he's in charge. And a lot of people focus on verse 18, chapter 2, verse 18, where God says, it's not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. And that sort of sounds, again, asymmetrical, like she's helping him accomplish what he wants. And that, I think, comes down to a word study of the word helper, which is azer in Hebrew. The word azer occurs as both a noun or a verb almost 100 times in the Hebrew Bible. Half of those times, it's referring to God as Israel's helper. Clearly, he's not he's not subservient to Israel. The other half of the occurrences are about a military ally who comes in to fight alongside you.
So it's never the example of a lesser that one has power over.
Yeah, there's never a case in which it's describing what a servant does for a master or an employer for an employee for an employer. So I think some of the hierarchy that people see in chapter 2, I think maybe is more a matter of tradition, the tradition of how they've read it and what they've been told it meant, rather than like emerging from the Hebrew context itself.
So I don't know why you think this interpretation matters. I'll give you my take. Is 2 nights ago, from the day we're recording this, I was at Cal Poly University having a dialogue with an atheist. About the problem of evil. And it was done, students, surrounded me, it was awesome. Some Christian students and one skeptical student really was leaning into how patriarchal the Bible is. And I said, there's some passages in the New Testament that we need to pay attention to. I'm not ignoring those. But to me, there's 2 reasons why I think it's not. Number one, look at the example of Jesus. There's no other religious leader throughout history, that I would trust my daughter with for a day, even close to the person of Jesus. And you go down the line, Joseph Smith, Muhammad, Buddha, abandoned his family. So that's one reason. But second, go back to Genesis. And you have God creates male and female. And as far as I understand, women were not ever or almost ever even mentioned in creation accounts. So the mention is powerful. From the side, like you said, who's an equal, she's also created last. So you could argue creation first is significant, but it's almost like,
last
all right,
is
I'm
best?
done. There might be something to that.
In chapter 1, last is best, because humans come last, male and female. So if we're gonna carry that forward into chapter 2, we get women as the crown of creation.
I totally agree. I've heard Dennis Prager Jew say it's almost like God is like, I'm done. I can't do any better. Now, as an apologist, it matters to me because I think the Bible profoundly from the beginning holds up the value and dignity of women.
It does.
Why does this passage matter to you?
Yeah, it matters to me because I think for a lot of human history, we have just so many examples of tension and angst between men and women and an exploitation of women that's just, every generation we see it surfacing again. And so if we read this verse as if God wants men to dominate women, then it seems to be putting a stamp of approval on these kind of negative patterns that we've seen through history, and I think that's really dangerous. So I think if we recognize this is a consequence of the fall, it's never been God's design for us to have this, for men to have a domineering relationship over women. As you said, the question of leadership, the question of the church is a separate question, but I think it does start here with what is God's original vision. And his vision is for male and female to collaborate in carrying out his work in the world.
I love it. We're doing an entire series now on Sundays on difficult Old Testament passages. We've got you signed up for about 7 or 8 just in Genesis and Exodus alone.
There's a lot to talk about.
So I'm looking forward to our next one. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you a tough question about your faith. How do you respond? If you're going to make the case for Christianity, you need more than good vibes. You need evidence and a way to find that evidence and communicate it well. Logos is the library that I use every day when I'm personally studying the Bible, when I'm preparing talks, lectures, getting ready for YouTube interviews. It's got original languages and tools you can use in one place and search in seconds. Start a 60-day free trial at logos.com/McDowell. Link is in the description.